Okay.
We're live. And we're live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Zoom-mediated Newburyport Historical Commission meeting of Thursday, 13th of August. We have a pretty full agenda, so I'll try to keep things moving right along, especially if I can find my document here that has all my notes and so forth. Just give me one moment here. Pardon the interruption. I want to just remind folks of a few things, and we'll do a roll call in just a minute. Actually, why don't I start with that? So I made a list in alphabetical order, so we'll go through that. We should have on the call. Well, Malcolm Conworth has not joined yet. Am I right? Is Malcolm? Are you here yet? Not seeing him there. Okay, so Malcolm Conworth not here yet. Christopher Fay, can you guys? What, you can leave yourselves unmuted for a minute so you can just respond.
Here.
Okay, there's Chris for Peter McNamee.
Here.
Joe Morgan.
Here.
Patricia Pecknick.
Here.
And myself, Glenn Richards, the chair. We have a fairly full agenda, so we'll try to move right along. Three of the items are very similar. They are applications to be, that fall into the Demolition Control Overlay District, DCOD for short, Demolition Delay Review Process. The process, to put it in its simplest form, is first, the commission makes a decision as to whether the property is historically significant and preferably preserved. If it is not, then that's pretty much the end of that matter, and the applicant is enabled to get a demo permit and so on. If it is historically significant and preferably preserved, we move on to a public hearing of the demolition plan. This is where you, the applicant, get a chance to present your plans, what you want to do and why you want to do it, etc. More of the what you want to do. These are consistent with the plans you've already filed in the office, so the commissioners have had a chance to review them to at least some degree. And that will be discussed. There will also be a public hearing or public comment period during which members of the public will be allowed to comment pro or con or neutral. So in the public comment period, the way that works in Zoom, if you haven't already done it, is you need to raise your hand somewhere in the Zoom meeting, depending on whether you're on a tablet or a Windows or a Mac or whatever. There should be a button or something on the screen to raise your hand, and that's what you do to let Andy Port, who is the moderator of tonight's call, he will be able to unmute you so you can speak and be heard. The public's video will not be enabled, but we do have enabled video for the commissioners, so you can see us. So without further ado, let us take up the first matter, which is 2 Neptune Street. I believe, is Patty Ann Bampos here and in the attendees? Looks like I do see Patty Ann, and talking has been turned on, Patty Ann. So you will have to find your mute control on your device so you can unmute yourself so we can hear you and you can talk to us.
Am I on?
Oh, we heard. Yep, we can hear you, Patty Ann. Is that you, Patty Ann?
I hope it's me.
Yep, it's you. Okay. So did you understand my explanation as to the 2 steps that we take here?
Yes.
Okay. So the first one, is to determine the historical significance. In your case, where your property has it's already listed as contributing. It's the district data sheet shows it as somewhere between, was it 1750? There it is. Thank you, Andy. To 1800, somewhere in there. But anyway, early 18th century. So it's one of the oldest, I guess I should say, structures in the city of Newburyport. So there's little doubt that it's historically significant, and it's I think the condition is such that it's probably preferably preserved, but I won't jump to any conclusions. Let me invite my fellow commissioners to, well, actually, I'll ask you, Penny Ann, is there anything you'd like to say regarding, first, just regarding the decision we make as to the historical significance or lack thereof?
Well, I think most of the buildings in Newburyport are historically significant. Yeah, I just,
Many are, it's true, many
they're
are.
all over 50 or 75 years old, most 95% of them. So I do agree this and everyone else is historically significant.
Okay, let me invite my commissioners. Does anyone have a comment or anything they'd like to say regarding this particular property's significance and whether it's preferably preserved?
I'm raising my hand, but may I share some of the house history?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to share research that was done by Barb Bailey, who lives over on Boardman Street. The original half house is from 1657. It's the 3-bay part of the house that is farthest from the water. It's a typical English style oak post and beamed and peg construction, so what we call a first period house. According to Barb's research, it may have been built by the same builder who built the Balch House in Beverly, which is a house museum. The two houses have identical summer beams with wide chamfers ending in lamb's tongue stops. Sometime between 1710 and 1720, the second part of the house was added. That's the other 2 bays that's closer to the river, that has the great fireplace. And the Pettingill family then had the house for 159 years. They are the people who added the shed that makes it a salt box. The shed was added between 1761 and 1775. Sam Pettingill was a carpenter who worked on the steeple of the Old South Church. The evidence that the salt box shed is pre-revolutionary is their very wide floor and ceiling boards in the attic. The boards measure 23 3/4 inches. And some of you know the story of the King's boards when King George III said in 1761 that all trees over a certain side were reserved for the Royal Navy for mast. So boards of 24 inches or more were evidence that you were cutting down trees that were mast trees. And so to meet the letter of the law, people sawed them down. So 23 3/4 inches. In 1782, the Pettingills divided their estate. Mary Pettingill, the mother, got to live in the half of the house nearest the water. The oldest son, David, got the older half, the 1657 half, and ever since then, the house has been split by deed. According to Richard Irons, who is a restoration master, mason restoration specialist, you can see in the attic how the second and the third parts were attached. So the purlins overlap where the original end wall of the first house was located. Usually in English style construction, the purlins extended beyond the wall. They would be exposed to the weather. And so in other first period houses, they have rotted and been sawed off. In this house, because the second part was added, they didn't have as much exposure and they've been preserved. The large beams in the end walls and above the wall separating the boarding room, and I love that, the boarding room when you had the baby, from the kitchen are original. There are some smaller beams, they're probably later, they're pit sawn, so that's how we can date them. And then during a 1975 restoration, the owners found the original door between rooms in the attic and saw little drawings from children, playing counting games. That's the end of the information that I got from Barb, but I will add that there are 29 houses in Massachusetts that purport to be as old as this or older, but I contacted the Colonial Society of Massachusetts to find out how many have been documented as containing structural evidence of that age. And so now the number's down to 10. Richard Irons said this house has that structural evidence. A lot of these first period houses are actually museums. So there's the 1661 James Blake House in Boston as a museum. Some first period houses have been dismantled. Parts of them are in the Smithsonian, the Met, and other museums. Ipswich has 2 houses older than this one. Salem has 2 that are older, but all 4 of those houses have been much altered. I think it's extraordinary that we have first period houses in Newburyport that are inhabited. And I think this one, given its location, if it were restored, completely restored, it could be the most beautiful, important house in Massachusetts.
Thank you,
Antique
Patricia.
house.
Oops, sorry, were you done?
No, antique house. Okay.
Thanks, Patricia. I'm sorry I didn't see you. Again, the restriction of how many people I can see at one time, so I didn't see your hand. Would anyone else have a comment to make? Or would someone like to make a motion?
A motion for what?
To as the motion would be that that the house is historically significant and preferably preserved.
Well, I would like to motion that it is not preferably preserved.
Okay, the motions are just for the commission, though.
Yeah,
So
right.
okay. The chair was addressing other commissioners.
Sorry, I've never done this before.
That's okay.
Oh, understandable.
That's all right, Patty Ann. So would one of the commissioners care to make that motion, or I can if you wish,
I will make a motion that it's historically significant
and preferably
and
preserved?
preferably preserved.
Is there a second?
I'll
And I
second.
was-
Okay, I heard a second. It sounded like two people, at least I heard Chris Frey. All right, so I'll do the roll call here. I still think we don't have Malcolm, and he's the first one on the list, right? Oh,
I can see Malcolm on the screen.
oh yeah, okay. So Malcolm is here. So Malcolm, you will need to unmute yourself to be heard. But anyway, so let me skip him for now. Christopher Fay,
Yes.
Peter McNamee,
Yes.
Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, Patricia Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay, myself, the chair, is a yes. Malcolm, were you able to unmute yourself?
He still appears to be having an issue with his mic, it looks like to me.
Okay.
I think he skipped Ron.
Yes.
Oh, I did.
Glenn, you left me off the calling of the roll.
Yeah, I had alphabetical order, and I thought to myself, gee, I'm last with an R, but I forgot all about you, Ron. You're the Z. Sorry about that. Your
I'm
vote?
always last.
I know. Your vote, Ron?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. My apologies. So, Patty, and what happens now is we go over your plans, your demolition plan, and there's a public hearing in which people can comment pro or con, et cetera. And there's a discussion among the commission, and we have to decide whether to allow you to go ahead with your as planned, or perhaps with certain modifications, if that can be agreed to right here, or impose a demolition delay, during which time the plans could either be modified or you could wait it out or whatever. And we can, if necessary, we can explain more about that when that time comes. So, Andy, you want to? Well, what would you like us to show on the screen, Patty Ann, so you can explain what it is you'd like to do?
Well, first, could I ask a question?
Sure.
So does that mean that preferably preserved does not get discussed? Like there's no public comment, or there's no comment from me on preferably preserved and fitting that definition? It just moves forward?
Let me see if I can explain that. In that first part of the decision, a structure can be determined to be A, not historically significant, B, historically significant but not preferably preserved, or C, historically significant and preferably preserved. If it's either of the first two, there's no further discussion, no public hearing. You go your merry own way to do whatever it is you want to do. When a house is historically significant, it's pretty unusual for it to be not preferably preserved. It typically happens when, I've seen it happen, for example, a house was so heavily modified that looking at it, you'd never even know it was old. It looked like a house from like the 60s or something. Or a house has such severe structural damage and lost so much of its structural integrity that it's a basket case essentially, and a candidate for total demolition. But aside from that, almost all historically significant, all the buildings we just deem historically significant are also perfectly preserved. Now, what that means, Patty Ann, it doesn't mean you can't do anything. What it means is that what it is you want to do gets reviewed by the board, which is what we're about to do now.
Okay, only because I have talked with a few people
Mhm.
and they believe that under the, let's see, the Secretary of the Interior Standards for the
Mhm.
treatment of historic properties, that I do not meet the first bullet item in their list of 8 bullets under standards for preservation. So I'm
What-
just,
Okay, what
A
bullet,
little-
what does that say?
it says that a property will be used as it was historically, or be given a new use that maximizes the retention of distinctive materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships. And then it continues on, where a treatment and use have not been identified, a property will be protected and, if necessary, stabilized until additional work may be undertaken.
So why do you think you don't meet that criteria? It
Well-
sounds like it was built as a residence and it's being used as a residence.
Well, but if we think of a property will be used as it was historically, then to me, yes, it is a home, but I am not cooking my meals in the fireplace and I'm not
Ah.
heating the home in the fireplace.
Yeah.
And I have indoor plumbing. I don't have
Right.
an outhouse and I don't have a clothesline. So it sounds like it's not in that preservation state.
Yeah. I think I feel pretty confident that your interpretation is a little overly strict. And I see, Peter, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I think we might want to go to her presentation of what she'd like to do before we get into a discussion of the appropriateness of it.
Okay, well, her argument is that we don't even need to do that because she doesn't think it qualifies. So I'm just trying to explain why we think it does. But I think, Penny Ann, I think your interpretation is a little bit too literal and overly strict when they,
Okay.
when they're talking about, if it was, formerly a warehouse and is now a condominium or something, that would be a different use. Why don't you, as Peter suggested, why don't you explain to us what it is you'd like to do?
Well, generally speaking, on the back side of the house, which
Mhm.
is the L side, I can't actually see the whole drawing. I can't see, is that SG3?
Yeah, sorry, this is Andy Port. I'm the Director of Planning and the host of the meeting. If you just tell me what you're looking for, I can pull up anything you're looking for. This is sheet SG3, so it's the second floor existing and proposed.
Okay, so that basically shows on the left how it was existing with that big empty space as the crawl space behind these 3 individual rooms. The study, which is really like a nursery space almost, a closet, there was a little vent space and a bath space. And I wish to make it to the right, make that study long, change the closet direction so that it maximizes the length of the closet, where it is the only closet that's in the entire house, which is amazing. And then make the bathroom bigger so that I can actually have a stackable washer dryer and potentially a linen closet in there.
Mhm. Okay,
And then
and
have
then,
windows on that north side.
right. And in order to do that, you need to bring the roof up by the creation or addition of a dormer, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, do you want to see, Andy, if one of the next pages shows that roof line, because that's, I think, the main thing here, since, and for Penny Ann and all concerned, the commission doesn't really regulate what goes on inside the house in the interior. Our purview is exterior roof line, things like that. So that's the kind of thing we're concerned with. Yeah, here we go. So here, this drawing that Andy's showing now shows on the
Yes.
top row, the existing elevations, and the bottom, the proposed elevation.
Yes.
So, so you can mainly see that from the what's Neptune Street view stays pretty much the same, but the view that you would see from Water Street and or whoever your backyard neighbor is would see the salt box in the lower left, you see the salt box with that dormer addition, shed dormer, correct?
Yes.
And you can see that shed dormer with skylights as well on the lower right. So if I summarize it correctly, so basically, and that sort of triple window in the third floor in that attic space, that's there now, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so it looks like you did, as I requested, you did have your architect update the existing to accurately reflect what's there now, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you
not
for doing
from
that.
when I bought the house. Yes.
Right, right. Okay, yeah, because originally I see there are 3 skylights on the Neptune Street, the front side, which the first drawings didn't have. So let me, is there anything else you'd like to add, or can I?
Well, I can just say, I mean, I had something prepared in the very beginning that seems
Okay.
late now to talk about the work that's been done so far, but any of the work that I've done so far, in my efforts, I have tried to repurpose as many of the materials as possible to stay and remain within the house. So anything that was removed from one wall posts or beams from a closet were repurposed, and those are pictures that were included in the original application. Oh, actually, the additional pictures were used in the half bath, or boards that were removed from the tool closet were used to repair floorboards in the kitchen and holes that were in the ceiling. So I've been consciously trying to reuse anything that is here to stay here. And that effort would continue with this next phase if this were approved.
Okay, and that's fine. And if there's anything else from that original presentation, in addition to that, you want to say, you can certainly state it now. Was there anything? But I think that was the gist of it about your your efforts to conserve the materials. Was there anything else?
Well, yeah, I just want to let everyone know that my insurance company has a big issue with the back roof. They did want to cancel me more than once last fall. They thought that the rear door, well, at the time it was before this door was replaced, they thought that the roof was in very poor shape. The wood shakes with the algae and the moss growing on it and the curling. I was up on the roof about 4 times trying to scrape things off. Those shakes are from, the second layer is from 2002. So when I did talk with them about keeping me on the policy, I did let them know that I was planning to submit an application for a dormer, and that at that time I would be replacing the roof. And that has kind of kept them at bay, but they don't like the condition of the roof as it is. So the roof is going to be replaced at some point.
Right.
For me, the shed dormer is just the simplest style of dormer that would work with the first period roof line. And I think I mentioned in the letter that I submitted with the application that I had wanted originally, I was thinking of going all the way to the edge, but when I talked with people at the planning department, they recommended that I pull it in a foot to leave that roof line exposed, that would be preferred by the Historic Commission.
Right.
So that's what I worked with my architect on.
Okay. Okay, I assume you're talking about the vertical setting in where the exterior wall of the dormer with the
Yes.
with the windows there, bringing that back in a little bit. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Patty Ann. So I'm going to, well, before I open it to a public hearing, did any of the commissioners have a question for Patty Ann before we turn it over to allow public comment? Ron, are you raising your hand?
Yes, a couple of small questions, if I may.
Sure.
The shed dormer, as it appears here, am I correct in assuming that it's not visible from the street level?
It is visible.
It is visible.
Yes, I'm on the corner of Water Street and Neptune Street.
Right. So Ron, this is Glenn. From Neptune Street, it wouldn't be because it's in the back. Oh, there we go. But
Oh, wow.
if you're on Water Street, it would be like
Alright.
as you're walking along by the water there.
Yeah. And this is the same footprint, though. You're working with the same
Yes.
footprint.
Yeah,
Yes.
footprint's not changing.
Okay. That's all
It's just the roof. And Penny, to that last question of Ron's, the only part that would have to be demolished would be parts of the roof to do the dormer. Is that correct?
Yes, just the roof.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Ron. If your hand is still up, so don't, if you're done, do put your hand back down so we can keep track of who needs to speak. Okay. I don't see any other hands among the commissioners. So if there is someone, a member of the public who has a comment, you also would need to raise your hand. I do see a couple of them. Andy, do you want to take them in whatever order you wish?
Sure. First person we have is Adam Wiseman. You should be able to unmute yourself and speak to the board.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
So I am the owner of the property. That's been
Oh, you just faded out, Adam. Can you speak up?
Yep, I'm sorry. So I'm the owner of the property directly connected to the 2 Neptune. Sorry, I'm 2.5.
Oh, okay. So it's the other kind of the other part of the same structure.
Exactly.
Okay,
Actually, let me just connect my mic.
sure.
I'll deal with it. So I'm about to be a bad neighbor, and it's hard for me. But I'm not in favor of this, unfortunately. I love the home that my father bought before he passed away last year. It is an old house. I know that because I deal with the imperfections myself. And I think this is a pretty substantial change to the roof line. Not just visible from Water Street, but also of course, from my home and our yard and our deck. I see the roof line from the water. It's pretty iconic. There isn't one like it. It's not just 75 years old. I won't do the math, but it is, as Patricia said, one of the oldest homes in the country. So I would like to be a good neighbor. I would like to support something that is a little bit closer to the pitch of the original roof, but this is, to me, an elective modification. I have the same closet limitations. I have fewer bathrooms than Patty Ann does, and it's kind of part of buying an old home.
Yeah.
And I think Patty Ann's done great things for the home and has been a great neighbor. I don't know that I would agree that all of the restoration has been done with full respect for original materials. I don't want to go into detail, but it's a little bit hard for me to support as a neighbor. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that, the impact on our view and our experience with the town would change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you, Adam. Can we move? Are you done? Can we move on?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next person we have is Tom Colterjohn.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go
Hello,
ahead, Tom.
this is Tom Colterjohn, 64 Federal Street, and I'm co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. The trust strongly opposes this shed dormer. The building is an absolutely wonderful historic testament to early buildings. It's an iconic building in Newburyport. I can't tell you how rare a salt box shape is. And I'm not even sure we have another one in Newburyport that even comes close to this. Placing a shed dormer on top of a historic salt box dramatically alters the streetscape, the historic structure itself, and is totally inappropriate. They didn't have shed dormers of this type until much later, hundreds of years later. This salt box shape is really unique, and it is a wonderful feature that it would be a tragedy if we lost it. So the trust opposes this. It would be sad to see that added to this wonderful structure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? And don't forget to take your hand back down once you've been recognized.
Is there a button that I show? Where's the button feature?
Who's? I hear someone asking about a button. Who is that?
That's Patty Ann, me.
Oh.
I'm just looking for where that button feature is.
To do what?
If you
Raise
move your
my hand.
mouse,
Oh.
you move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, it should appear.
But
Oh, there it is.
Are we just having public comment first, or are we,
Yeah, this is the public comment period.
if you're the applicant, maybe waiting until after public comment?
Yeah,
would
yeah.
be
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Better, thank you.
Patricia, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Andy, but I think did you have a letter, Patricia, from, was this the property that?
Yes. We on the commission received a letter, and I was asked to read it into the record, so I will do that. The letter is from Linda Miller, 20 Ship Street. She's the co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. And she writes, "Hello, all you devoted Newburyport Historical Commission members. Stewardship is the ultimate goal of historic preservation and the end result we hope for. It involves maintaining an historic structure and loving it, keeping it for future generations to enjoy and learn from. For an historic property, it can mean salvation and care, an extension of life and beauty. For stewardship to work, there has to be interest, learning, and care. The history and features of a particular property contribute to its uniqueness. The context of the community and region are also factors in the fabric of the property. All these things can help retain the historic assets of Newburyport. The house at 2 Neptune Street is one of, if not the oldest house in the city. There's so few of them left that it is necessary to say that all of them should be saved and treasured, stewarded, not changed. The uniqueness of the saltbox roof is one of the most iconic features of this very old house and should be kept, treasured, and left to give off its beauty to all who view it. Please use your commission to keep this wonderful property as it should remain. Signed, Linda Miller, co-president, Newburyport Preservation Trust."
Okay, thank you, Patricia. If there are no other speakers in the audience, I don't see any. Oh, someone just raised a hand. Is that Mr. Philip Schwartz?
Yep. Philip, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I guess we actually live down Water Street, kind of down at the other end of Joppa Flats. We also have an historic house, and just listening to the discussion, I guess the question that I have is, so to me, the request that the applicant's making is what I guess I would call a livability request in order to really make the house livable for her and her family. We don't have a whole bunch of closet space in our house either, so when she sort of said that she doesn't even have a closet in the house, it certainly resonated with me. So I certainly, and we love old houses. That's why we bought the house we did. So I completely understand the people saying about preserving the houses, but on the flip side, I guess the question to the commission is a livability one. How do you make that compromise for somebody who, it sounds like from what the applicant's saying, clearly loves her old house, yet on the flip side wants to make a modification that's really going to allow her to live in the house. That's to me, I think what we're really discussing, and I guess I'm interested in hearing from the commission how you sort of walk that line.
Okay, I'll try to answer that. Philip, and it's a difficult line to walk. I'll harken back to when I came before the city council to tell them about what my philosophy was, and to be just a member of the historical commission. This is when I first joined. And I felt that the historical commission, shouldn't just be the committee of no, shouldn't just be, shouldn't be the kind of commission that acquires the nickname the hysterical commission and so on. I think there was a lot of bad, some of those commissions get a lot of bad press, but we should try to strike a fair balance between historic preservation and the fact that some, people, sometimes need a kitchen, or their bathroom is unusable or whatever. So we do strike that balance, try to strike that balance. We might not always get it right on hit the nail exactly on the head, but we do try. I'll just, all I can say is that it's a difficult one. We have to weigh the needs and requirements of individual homeowners against the needs and values and desires of the city to preserve its heritage. If you look at the ordinance for the DCOD, it has verbiage. In fact, I quote from it: "The preservation, rehabilitation, and enhancement of the city's historic character is critical to the preservation of the city's heritage and land values. It's recently state-approved cultural district, and otherwise to benefit the general welfare of its citizens and property owners." This is the kind of preamble to why this DCOD ordinance was set up, and the role of the Historic Commission within it to, weigh these matters. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but it's kind of a case-by-case basis. Each one is taken on its own merits. I think we never like to say no. I don't think it brings any of us joy to turn down an applicant. So we generally only do it when there is really when there's perceived to be a serious harm to a significant cultural asset to the city and the community. Okay, any other public? I'm not seeing any, so I will formally close the public comment period. Now, Patty Ann, I think you intended to say something earlier. Was there a comment that you wanted to make before I turn to my fellow commissioners for any discussion?
Yes, a few comments. First, I wanted to respond to my neighbor Adam's comment, given that we are next door neighbors and joined by a wall. I do live here year round, and Adam and his sister have inherited the home, unfortunately, from the passing of his father. So they primarily vacation here on weekends or weeks, which makes their need a little bit different. They're not storing unfortunately, the amount of seasonal stuff that I am attempting to and have brought from a bigger house to this house. He also has a very modern deck that is on the backside of his property. And that's part of the reason why I don't think that the preferably preserved applies, because when you look at the building as a unit, the modern deck just really throws you off. I believe that was added as a potential second egress. I think in the 1980s, I'm not 100% sure, but so that's my response for that situation. A very, very small bathroom with one closet for a normal person I just don't think it's unrealistic to ask that a stackable washer dryer be able to fit into the bathroom, which is part of the reason why I submitted a picture of my basement on the second round of pictures, to show that there's no physical possibility to put a washer dryer in the basement. I have 2 retaining walls on each side. It's really like a gauntlet that you're going into, and it's a wet basement also that I will be working on. The additional pictures that I submitted for 12 and 13 Neptune, many people have said that this is the oldest house in town. On websites, I have read that the the house on Woodwell Ave is older, as in 1649, but there's a lot of information I've read that does not agree in dates. But I wanted to show pictures of 12 and 13 Neptune, who were also in the historic, they're older than 75 years old, so we're all in the same age group as part of this application, that have been permitted to, number 13, did a very nice addition, first floor addition for her mom to come up and live with her from Florida. And then number 12 did a side addition in 2015. That house is, I believe, circa 1800. And then more recently, on 61 Purchase Street, is doing just a massive addition that I've taken pictures from the street, from the Neptune Street and from Purchase Street, just to show what is actually happening in my immediate neighborhood. So yes, my house might be older than these houses, but we're all actually in the same category. I've also submitted pictures of 57 Milk Street and 71 Middle Street to show their roofline changes. I don't have a date on when those permits were done, but there's a lot happening in town as far as changes for livability. And I'm really just trying to live here. I love this house. I love this house. I love my neighbors. I think that this is an absolutely fantastic city. I feel extremely safe here. And the work that I've been doing in the last year has actually and will, I truly believe, help this house to live and be here, be standing another 200 or 300 years. I have discovered beams where ceiling beams were barely notched into the vertical posts that they were sitting in, that I've shored up with either studs or steel beams. And those were pictures in this additional packet that I think came out a little dark when I looked at them online, but you see one example of a kitchen beam that was being held up by a bottle jack. That was a surprise, but was fixed so that now, and it was hollow. When I put my hand up at the top of the bottle jack, it was hollow in that beam. So I am actually fixing things as they come up. They're unanticipated, but I am trying to make them last a very, very long time. Well past, I mean, if I plan on being here 30 or 40 years, I'm planning on this house lasting another 100 to 200 years past me. So I am trying my best effort to make this the best house that it can possibly be. The beams are exposed on the first floor and they're absolutely beautiful. I've been trying to oil them just to get them, they're very, very dry, just to get them back to where they need to be. I mean, there's a lot of beauty that is here that I want to keep intact. So I am doing my best.
Okay, thank you, Penny Ann. The fellow commissioners, commentary, questions, discussion? Don't be shy.
I have some.
Yeah.
Comments. Am I unmuted? I can't tell.
Yes, we can hear you, Patricia.
I lost Zoom for a moment there. I want to address my comments to others on the commission and just say, you know, our job is to protect the exterior of the house. We may be pleased that the applicant has reused materials from the interior, and we may be sympathetic to the idea of, you know, a laundry room and all that. I personally, I'm confused by the invoking of the secretary's standards at this phase. I wish the standards had been consulted on the other things that were done on the exterior. But in any case, the section that's being quoted from the standards by the applicant is not the right section. The applicant is quoting the standards for a new exterior addition on or new construction to the site. That's not the same as the standards for rooftop additions. So The standards for rehabilitation define rehabilitation as preserving those portions and features of the property which are significant to its historic, architectural, and cultural values. To me, this plan does not preserve the key defining architectural feature of the property, which is the salt box roof line. Now, the term rehabilitation, of course, assumes that some repair or alteration might happen, but the standard says, quote, "These repairs and alterations must not damage or destroy materials or features that are important in defining the building's historic character." So I'm looking at standard 2 under rehabilitation, and it says the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. Standard 5 says distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. I then looked at the Technical Preservation Services brief on roofs from the National Park Service, and they also recommend against changing the configuration of a roof by adding features such as dormer windows, vents, or skylight. Under alterations or additions for the new use, the secretary says, of course, that dormers should be conspicuous from a public right of way. We talk about that often when we look at dormers. I really do think that this house could be restored beautifully, but the dormer will turn a corner on that. And if it were my house, I mean, the return on investment, I think, is in the restoration, not in this sort of updating. I know some new windows have been cut on the waterside elevation in the rear. And I was curious about how such things impact the value of the property. So I talked with a gentleman named Donovan Rekempka, who's the founder of Place Economics, which is a economic development consulting firm. He has written a lot about economic development in historic districts, and he authored the U.S. Department of the Interior report called Measuring Economic Impacts of Historic Preservation. All of his work documents how preserved and restored historic properties appreciate in real estate value, much more than historic properties which have been subjected to exterior alteration. If I were the homeowner, and we're being taxed on a house that is listed as an antique, and antiques have the highest tax rates in the city, I wouldn't give up its market value as an antique by this kind of shed dormer alteration. The salt box roof is really the defining feature. And, you know, the King's board, ceiling boards are cut into, the application says the purlins would be removed. Those are things that we can't see from the outside. So I might lament them, but the distinctive roof line, I think, is so critically important that I oppose any dormer on the roof.
Thank you, Patricia. Do any other commissioners have a comment of any kind? Or don't be shy. Mr. Morgan, is that your hand?
It is. Thank you, Chair Richards. I was just biking by there today, and I saw that one block down at, I think it's 212 Water Street, the western flanking house to the entrance to Hale Memorial Park also has a salt box profile. I don't know if certainly doesn't look as old as 2 Neptune, but it has the same profile. And lo and behold, they do have a dormer. The difference in that, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is I agree entirely with Commissioner Pecknick that the shed for the salt box should be preserved. It is the most historical feature of the building, and it is rare, and it should be preserved. But there are certain architectural aspects to the problem also that points in that direction too, is that it's a highly visible roof as you come down Water Street going east toward Plum Island. It's the adjacent property to the rear on Water Street is set back. So you see this roof and it's a very visible and architecturally accentuated feature. but you do just immediately after, one more block down, you see it, you're confronted with another salt box roof pointing at you, and it does have a dormer, but it's a much more diminutive dormer, and it doesn't spring from the ridge line like this one does, and it's only in the middle of the roof. And this roof here is only on the 2 Neptune side. It is not on the adjacent 2.5 side, whereas the other salt box roof is both of the half houses. The shed is attached to both, and therefore the dormer is only sitting in the middle of a much larger roof expanse, and it does not spring from the ridge. So it works, I think, simply because it is not overly compromising the appreciation of the full slope of the salt box shed. So again, to reiterate, I don't think there's a solution here, a similar solution for this property because of its visibility and because of its the strength of its historical character. I don't think there's really a solution here for dormer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Okay, anyone else? So our hand, Christopher Fay, did you want to make a comment?
Just a quick comment. I agree with everything that everyone said, and the dormers just, I don't think it works. Just something to maybe follow up on what was said earlier. I think Patricia said about the preservation, and this is a unique property, not just in the structure, but its placement. It's in what was once what I understand, talking to people that have lived here their whole lives, a very dangerous neighborhood. I once lived in the South End. That is now, that's one of the premier spots right on a prime road in the city, right on the river. And it was something that it sort of just came to me when I moved into this house where I live in now. The real estate agent said the poverty is a great preserver. And this house looks like it's, it didn't have a lot of maybe TLC over the years because it was a very, very poor neighborhood. And now what a treasure it is because people didn't put a first floor addition on, didn't do all of this type of work before because they likely couldn't afford it. Probably until, the early 1990s, that was not maybe 80s, that was not a great place to live. So I think it's a real treasure. I agree with Tom. I agree with everybody said. I just want to make that clear that I think to harm a hair on this particular house would be unfortunately a grave mistake. And I understand the needs of the sort of 21st century, but looking at this, the house has maintained its structure more or less for 350 years. I think it can probably go another 100 without a shed dormer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Ron, did you raise your hand just now?
Yes. This livability, interior livability concept is always giving me trouble. And I understand that our purview does not include consideration of the interior of the house. Now, does that mean that we have to turn our backs on the question of livability? Because that's what we're doing here. I will say at the outset that I do agree with what everyone has said, but I feel like I'm being forced to agree because of the circumstances of where our purview is. Our purview is strictly the exterior of the house and not the interior. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would add that it's been my experience that in weighing these decisions, other factors are certainly come into consideration, but in terms of what we're legally responsible for, it's the preservation of what's visible on the outside.
Mm-hmm. So that if a circumstance dictates allowing a shed dormer for livability inside, does that mean that we are permitted to go there or not?
You want me to try to answer that question, Ron? Wasn't sure if that's a rhetorical question or
Well,
a real one.
it's a rhetorical question, I guess, but if you have some comment on it, I would appreciate it.
Well, as I said, those things are, the livability issue is taken into consideration, and I think on each case-by-case basis, at least I find myself, I can speak for myself here, I find myself weighing the pros and cons, how much of a detriment is this, is what's proposed going to be versus, the livability issues. Maybe there's a different solution. Maybe there's something that can be done to improve livability. It's not quite so detrimental to the historical fabric or the historical characteristics of the structure and that sort of thing. So we're not forced to decide either way. I think that as you've been on this board for a while, so I'm sure you've seen examples where we weren't particularly pleased with what the proposed plan was, but the applicant has done some work to try to come up with an alternate solution to address their livability issues in a way that's, that doesn't do as much harm to the historical characteristics.
Can we ask the owner if she's made any exploration to that end?
Sure, can ask. Patty Ann is still on, and I think she's still unmuted. Do you want to try to respond to that, Patty Ann?
Could Ron rephrase that question? I'm not sure how to best answer that.
Yes. If the vote of the committee tonight is against the idea of the shed dormer, where do you go from there?
I thought it goes to okay, so I guess I might be confused on the outcome. I thought this goes to a demolition delay.
Right, if that's actually correct, Penny Ann.
Oh, okay.
If we decide that we don't approve of the demolition plan, which we're reviewing right now, we impose the 1-year demolition delay. Usually what happens in my experience on the board is that before that year is up, the applicant usually comes back with an altered plan that addresses whatever the concern was, and we come up with something, some alternate solution that the applicant is okay with and the commission is okay with, and then they go ahead and they don't actually have to wait an entire year. If there isn't any solution that can be reached that way, then I haven't seen it happen yet, but presumably at the end of a year delay, you would have the right to go ahead and do it. That's my understanding of the ordinance anyway.
To install a by right dormer, right? Not one of these dimensions, right? There's a difference between the dormer that's proposed.
That's a good question. Yeah, it would probably have to be a by right dormer, Patricia. That's probably correct.
What is
But I'd
that?
have to. There's in one of the more recently updated codes, local codes, there's a definition of what we call a by right dormer. In other words, if your dormer meets certain specs, for example, one change you're ready to move that vertical wall back a little bit from the back vertical wall. If your dormer meets certain specifications, you don't need like a special permit or anything. But the dormer you're proposing does not meet those specs at present.
Because it's too big, is that right?
Right. I think the height of the ridge line going up to the ridge line of the roof, and the size, and yeah, probably the setbacks in the left and right too. I haven't looked at that in detail.
Well, I feel that if this were not one of the 10 oldest houses in Massachusetts, I thought I heard that.
Yeah.
One of the oldest houses in Massachusetts. I might feel differently about it, but under the circumstances, I have to agree with everybody who's spoken already.
Yeah.
Even though I feel terrible.
Yep.
That here's a woman who's bought this house and wants to live in it in some degree of comfort, and is unable to, at least on the upstairs, for various reasons. And it's a shame that we can't accommodate this.
Yep, I understand. That's like what I said earlier, Ron. Yeah, I never take any joy in, turning down an applicant. Okay, well, we do need to move along. We have, although
May
I
I
do see a couple.
comment?
What was it? Who was that?
This is Patty Ann. May I comment?
Can you hold off just because I see some of the commissioners, like Peter McNamee, has something to say. So,
Okay.
so hold your thought, please.
Yeah,
Peter,
and
did you want?
I can be brief because I don't have too many new ideas to introduce. I sympathize with what Ron is saying because we do want to take the livability of a structure into account, but that isn't what that isn't within our purview. So if we were to try to tackle that on each application, we'd move very slowly indeed. So our role, as I understand it, is to safeguard the historical treasures of this community. And two of the things that are going against this particular application is what Chris said a moment ago about visibility. This is an extraordinarily visible first period treasure. It really is a remarkable property, and salt boxes are such a distinct shape that this is noticed by people coming and going in the city. Everyone that's driving down Water Street notices this house. It's one of the first things I saw when we moved here many years ago. So that really goes against the notion of, can we make dramatic changes to a house that stood for over 3 centuries as it is, or much of that time as it is. So while I would like to discuss livability because that's a practical concern, I don't think we can. And if we want to safeguard what the commission is supposed to be doing, we have to recognize this building should be left with that distinctive roof line.
All right, thank you, Peter. Okay. Now, Ron, your hand, but Peter and Ron, your hands are still up, but I assume you've spoken, right?
Yep.
Okay. Patty Ann, did you want to say something now?
Yes, I do. I have a couple of things. First, I feel very, very uncomfortable relying on information that was presented in a letter that someone read, Patricia read, regarding the 10 oldest houses in Massachusetts, because I do not know that that's an actual fact. Unless it's corroborated or there's some way to confirm that. I have looked on many, many websites. And I looked at Historic Ipswich. There's 100 oldest houses in Massachusetts that I could not find myself on. And I have paperwork everywhere that has all different notes on it, but I cannot honestly say that I'm one of 10 houses in Massachusetts that is the oldest. I mean, I would physically like to see that in writing. I don't feel comfortable relying on information.
Can you if you contact the Colonial Society of Massachusetts, they're down
I have printed out some of their stuff.
Otis
Yes.
Street in Boston, and they can provide it. I don't. It doesn't sway my opinion whether it's one of 10 or one of 50. It's there. It's ours. It's Newburyport. So, but I understand that. Then you're right. There's a lot of information on, Wikipedia, and a lot of people, I guess, have made their houses older than they are. Over time, realtors sometimes do it and misdate things. So I understand there's probably a lot of confusing information out there for homeowners unless you do the deed research.
Yes. Also, I'm not sure who exactly said that this was a treasure, and it is a treasure, but this is actually a treasure that was on the market for 6 months, and which I find a very interesting feature, because typically property that looks over the water is desirable property. And it sat and it sat and it sat because people came in and saw it and thought about it and then decided that they couldn't undertake it. They didn't have the wherewithal to go through the process, to investigate the walls, to update features, to spend the money. I mean, you know, sometimes owning a historic house is a rich man's dream, and I do not have deep pockets. I am trying to physically do the best that I can with what I have on a single income and preserve what I can while I'm doing it. And I get comments all of the time from people walking by who don't know me from a hole in the wall, who say that they are so happy that someone is finally working on this house, to neighbors that are very, very happy that their view is finally improving. There were 2 last letters that came in. They were written late and they did not get attached to this folder. And I was hoping that since 1 letter was written, that I could potentially read that. I could read one of the 2 letters that came in late from one of my neighbors on the street. Is that?
Well, during the public comment, that would have been okay. I would kind of like to move on. We've been on this nearly an hour at this point. So I'd like to try to move on unless you feel it's something that would be likely to change anyone's mind.
No, I just think it's from someone who's lived in Newburyport all their life.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's just 2 letters that did not get posted because
Okay.
of the lateness.
No, we did read them and we had them in our packet. So everyone got them and we all read them. I think the public comment period should be closed, and I do agree with the chair that we have to move forward.
Yeah. Well, actually, it has been closed for a while. Okay. Well, thank you, Patty Ann. Would anyone care to make a motion as to the disposition of this particular matter?
I would like to make a motion to impose the demolition delay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That was Christopher Fay. So I'll go through my roll call here, not forgetting Ron. So Malcolm, try again to see if you can unmute yourself and we'll get your vote in. But while you're doing that, Christopher Fay, your vote on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Patricia Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, Ron?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is yes. Malcolm, are you able to, did we lose Malcolm? Not seeing him anywhere.
He keeps I can see him on my screen. He just muted himself.
Malcolm, unmute yourself, Malcolm.
Oh yeah, I see him there too. 3, 2, 1. Last call for Malcolm. Or Malcolm, if you can, raise your hand or something to indicate that you can, you're hearing. Oh, I don't know what to say. Oh, we've got to move on. So I'll put Malcolm as a non-vote, but we do have 6 yays. So for the sake of time, Patty Ann, since it sounds like you're maybe has a lot of questions as to what to do next, can we defer that to discuss between yourself and members of the planning staff and so on, so we can, because we really need to move on with tonight's agenda.
Of course. So I just set up an appointment with the planning department.
Yeah, you can speak to Caitlin Sullivan is on the call. She's been listening to this whole thing, and so she can try to help you as far as explaining what your next steps might be.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for attending and for your patience in getting through this fairly long discussion. All right. So, like moving on, the next property on the agenda is 46 Toppings Lane. This is a structure down near Low Street. A dormer comes into it, a little bit different situation in this case. more like a Victorian era building that has a dormer already, but not in an ideal place for what the applicant wants to do. The applicant is Craig Pessina and Eileen Graff, I believe, is the architect. Let's see if I'm seeing them in the attendees. I see Eileen Graff, and she is talking enabled. I don't see the other.
Sorry, this is Andy for the record.
Yep.
Craig is here, believe, but I've had to treat him as a panelist because of the Zoom version of Zoom he's using. So,
Okay.
Are you there?
Andy, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, so again, the first decision is as to whether the property or the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved, similar to the one we just went through. Would either of you like to make any comment regarding that particular decision?
Hi, good evening. It's Eileen Graff with Graff Architects. And yes, as far as the date of the building, it's on record as 1887. I think Craig agrees with me. We don't have any reason to argue that it isn't historically significant.
Okay.
But as you mentioned already, Mr. Chair, that it's just simply a question of the roof line change.
Correct.
Due to access, comfortable access to the third floor.
Right. So it was probably the roof line change that triggered the review.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, for the sake of time, perhaps I'll go ahead and make the motion this time around. The motion would be, well, actually, I might be jumping on a little bit. Any of the commissioners have a question or comment before I go ahead and make the motion? I was going to move that it's historically significant and preferably preserved. Any? Not seeing any objections or hands. So I'll make that motion that we deem it to be historically significant and preferably preserved. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, that sounded like Peter?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Okay, going around the horn again. It's funny, Malcolm is first on my list, but he's sona non sound. Okay, but let me continue on. And if Malcolm, if you can get you're unmuted from our side. So if you can get yourself unmuted, we're all ears. Christopher Fay, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Patricia Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, the chair is a yes. And Ron?
Yes.
Okay, so Eileen, and the applicant was again Craig, I think, and Craig is on the call as well?
Yes.
Okay, so Eileen, do you want to speak to the project?
I sure can.
Okay, so we enter the demolition review or demo plan review at this point. I'm sure you're familiar with it, Ms. Graff, from prior projects that you no doubt have been involved with. So why don't I allow you to present your plans?
Thank you very much. So again, in reviewing, as you can see from this existing exterior elevation, the original structure, the two-story with a gable roof, it was dating at 1887. It's not a large original footprint. It's kind of curious because it's actually rather short. It's only 22 wide by 24 deep. Then at some later date, this back rectangular addition was put on with the essentially flat roof and this sort of long 16 wide by 28 long addition off the rear. In the back of the property, not shown in these drawings, but when we get to the site plan, there's a freestanding barn as well that goes along with the property. Craig's intent with this property is to really do minimal intervention and restore the qualities that are there. Structurally, it's in pretty good shape inside. So there's just some shoring up of structural members within. If you look to the right on that existing front elevation, there is a covered porch there. That is one intervention that he's already done, which was remove what was closed in that area, and now by bringing it back to the open columns and the covered porch, we now can see more of the original house, sort of revealing the first level on that northeastern side
Right.
of the house. On that same elevation, I'll point out that shed dormer on the top left of that gable. And then if you go to the right elevation, you could see it from the side, which would be the view from Low Street. And you could see
Right.
that single double hung window on the roof. And that's the area where we would like to take that dormer. And currently it's curiously placed in what looks like a bedroom, but meanwhile to the right of it is the staircase going up. So you end up kind of in an awkward crawling up way. You're bending so your head doesn't hit the roof. And so what we are proposing is essentially to take, thank you, Andy, a shed dormer similar, just a little bit wider, just enough to meet that existing stair. I mean, we would prefer not to alter the stair within, and we felt that this simple slide of a shed dormer, minimal in profile, similar to the point that I would think many in the community might not even notice such a change because they're so similar in profile.
Mhm.
The front elevation, the rear elevation remain the same. It's just simply the Low Street face that gets a little bit wider. And of course, its location in floor plan, directly above the existing stair.
Mhm.
So that is the explanation in the architectural drawings, but maybe we can go to the photographs, yes, and of the site. So here on the site plan, you could see where it sits on the corner of Low and Toppins. To behind the property is that existing barn that I was talking about. The dark outline property to the right, that is getting removed. It's part of the project to the right, where they are creating in the process of building a new structure for a garage purpose, but which is that light line one right below it. And once that's completed, they will tear down that other garage structure. So this property will sit nice and clean in sort of the visual connection of the historic barn behind it with the original structure in front. And then if we go to the next slide, we can give some context to it, to the neighborhood. On that top photograph, this gives you a little more sort of roof lines, etc., similar to what we were just looking at, but with some description of the neighboring properties. So there is a void to the, yeah, thank you. So here's the property, and from the front elevation viewed from Toppins, and you could see the original gabled structure up front with the flat roofed addition on the back, and then the barn on the rear, which will also be restored. Then from Low Street, peeking through the trees there, the existing single window dormer towards the rear of the roof's edge there. And the next elevation from the rear of the property, looking at that shed.
Mhm. So I take it there's a little triangular piece of property there right in the corner. Is that a different owner? I take it.
It is, yes.
Yeah, maybe too small to build on or something. No, it's irrelevant, I guess.
Actually, those lots were broken off by approval not required. Essentially, they're buildable lots.
Really? Okay, interesting. All right, well, we digress. I want to stick to the things that we, for the sake of time, have purview over, because you mentioned the garage and so forth, but that demo and reconstruction of that is not on our tonight's agenda, correct?
Yes,
Right.
that's the neighboring property.
I just had one question, Eileen, if I may, on the windows. Do you plan to, for your new dormer, do you plan to use this match up with the existing windows?
Correct, yes.
You do, okay.
So we want to use 2/2 to match the rest of the house.
Mm-hmm. Okay, similar materials as well?
Similar materials, clapboard, yes. So there were minimal changes, in reference to the entire building, even though we're speaking to you on the dormer. There's minimal changes to the exterior openings, really minor. in changes from existing to proposed.
What are the existing and proposed dormer dimensions?
Sure, I can tell you that. So the existing dimension is just about 6 feet. And the proposed, I have it down as 9'3", but really working with the headroom needed for the stair below, so that might get an inch or two bigger when they're under construction, just to make sure it's fitting to the headroom needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And again, these are the sides of that dormer are sitting back from both the front and the rear gable ends. So from the front, it's showing that it's 6'4.5" from the Toppings Lane elevation. And then from the rear of the property, it's almost 9 feet back.
Right. And Andy, could you pop back to the existing one? I think it's just a previous page. I just want to see. Okay. What I was looking at was the vertical face of the dormer. It looks like both the existing one is also kind of in the same vertical plane as the wall below, but it's kind of rescued from looking very because of the large eave, it has the appearance of being more set back. So because when I was looking at the proposed one there, I noticed it was in that same vertical plane. And I'll just say right up front, I don't like dormers that go right up to the same ridge line, but I noticed that the existing one does as well. So it's really just kind of a relatively small enlargement and moving over more than anything else. Okay, was there anything else, Eileen? Because I want to move on to the commission.
No problem. I think that's all I needed to convey.
Okay. Now, Patricia, yeah, I see you raising your hand in the TV camera. Go ahead.
I was going to say the existing dormer is pretty awkwardly placed, and I think the proposed wider but centered dormer as a replacement makes sense. And it does face Low Street from a pretty long distance across the yard. Yeah. So I would support this.
Okay. Anyone else on the commission have a comment? Let's see. Anyone raising a hand? Ron, did you have a comment?
Just want to say that I would agree with Patricia on this.
Okay, thank you, Ron. I don't see any other hands up. Would one of you two or anyone else like to make a motion that the applicant be permitted to proceed with the plans as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so Ron is making a motion that the applicant be permitted to proceed with these plans as submitted. Is there a second?
This is Joe. I second that.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So we'll go around the horn again. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Okay. Hang on a second. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Patricia Pecknick?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is a yes. Malcolm, did we ever get Malcolm on board? I see him there. Maybe he's just listening and can't talk. Well, we'll have to get your technology issues fixed, Malcolm, if you can hear me. Okay, well, thank you. So Eileen, I think you know what this means. Means that your applicant can proceed with the plans. I hope they don't have that little triangular lot next door. I hope they don't end up with some structure there that kind of spoils the appearance of that corner lot. But hey, I don't have any say over that, and you probably don't either. But
thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. I appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, let's move on to 368 High Street. Kevin and Ali Fru. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Do we have them here?
Yep, yeah. We're here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So same drill. Was that Kevin or Ali, or who's going to speak?
Kevin, it's Kevin and Allison are both here, and Kevin's gonna speak.
Oh, okay. So it's Ali as in Alice. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting that.
No problem.
Okay, so Kevin and Ali, you know you've seen the drill here. First, the commission makes a decision as to whether the place is historically significant and preferably preserved, and if not, you're free to go. If it is, we review your demo plan and take it from there, as there's a public hearing on that.
Okay.
So let's move right along. Do you have any comment, Kevin, on the historical significance or lack thereof of the property?
No.
Okay. Anyone on the commission have any comment on that? Yes, no, maybe, nobody? Does anyone would anyone care to make a motion of determination whether of historical significance and preferably preserved? Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Of the applicant? I'm just wondering if the addition was built over a much earlier foundation. Just because I'm curious, did you find any evidence in the brickwork down in the basement level that there was an addition there before that was maybe older than the current addition, which I looked at and agree is not that old and not in great shape? I'm just wondering what's in the basement of it.
There's no basement. It's just it's not part of the real foundation footprint. It just has brick like columns that you would see in sort of like an older basement as the posts.
Oh, okay. That's what I was seeing in the picture then. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it looks like maybe it was originally a shed.
Yeah, and Patricia, from what I recall of the photographs that they submitted, there was a photograph that looked like there it is. That's kind of what I was looking at. Looks, yeah, I don't know, it doesn't. Not looking good.
So I'll explain it a little bit. So
sure.
To the right is cinder blocks, and then and then you've got the real foundation of the house behind it, and then you can see sort of like the column, right there, and then those columns have been filled in with like I don't know, paneling almost, sort of, but it's not. It doesn't have there's no basement. It's just like a porch almost.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and Patricia, if you look at this, from my experience, it looks like a fieldstone at the bottom, and then it turns to brick with that. You see that row of I forget what the name is when they're laid out vertically like that, and then the horizontal course is above it. Looks very much like, they had a fieldstone foundation and then the brick for the, the top few feet. So that's probably where the original foundation ended, right there. My house is quite similar, actually, in terms of the way the foundation is. So Kevin, and Ali, what we do is the determination applies to the entire house. Doesn't mean that you would, even if we do find that the house is historically significant and preferably preserved, doesn't necessarily mean you won't be able to demolish this little addition on the back, but we do need to first make that determination. So since I'm shooting my mouth off already, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we do deem it to be historically significant and preferably preserved so we can do the demo plan review. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, I heard two. I think one of them might have been Peter and maybe Chris. So let's go around the horn again. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Patricia?
Yes.
Okay, Ron?
Yes.
And the chair is yes. Okay, so we've made a determination, Kevin and Ali, that it's historically significant and preferably preserved. So we have a public hearing on your demo plan review. It's pretty straightforward in this case. I think it can be very easily summarized by saying that maybe, yeah, there we go. Thank you, Andy. Andy switched it to the photo that shows the subject matter in question. And in fact, I kind of humorously commented to some of the staff that you apparently didn't make any effort to pretty it up for the photos. At any rate, the proposal is to simply remove this little thing, this room that's been added on to the rear. And Kevin, I appreciate your sense of humor in calling it what'd you call it, a first generation man cave or something like that.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. So that's the deal. So before I forget, I don't know how many attendees we still have if they're out there in the general public, but I will open it for public comment if there is any. So let's give a few seconds, see if there's any member of the public that has a comment. I'm not seeing too many people out there that might even want to comment. Anyone going once, going twice? I think probably not. Okay, then I'll close the public comment period, brief as it was, and turn it over to the commissioners. Does anyone have either a question or a comment for either the applicant or anything at all?
Quick question is, under describe reasons for demolition, you said for more useful addition. So, I mean, I know there's no plan or anything, but what are you thinking of, something the same size, or are you looking to build something bigger back there? Just curious.
I mean, we haven't really gotten that far. It's just, we're going to try to get it weather tight in the rear and stop looking at that for a while.
Yeah.
And then hopefully bounce out the kitchen into something. But we're working with Scott Brown, and we're at like the very preliminary stages of what's next.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably a couple years off from doing anything next. This is really kind of a buttoning up the house and getting it livable, weather tight, and then sitting for a couple years and figuring it out.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I assume that was Ali speaking?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, and just FYI, I had a brief conversation with the planning board about this. We may see you again when you do have, depending on what it is you want to build, there are probably certain things you can do without having to come back before the commission, and certain other things that either by the extent or if there's a roof line change and so on, that you may be back before the commission again for those plans. But for now, it's just strictly the removal of this particular addition. Anyone else on the anyone else on the commission have a question or a comment?
Can I make a recommendation?
Sure.
It's always great if, while you're planning that new addition, if you do happen to look at on the NHC website is the Secretary's standards for rehabilitation. And so just look at, things that will inevitably come up in meetings like this and I'm sure Scott Brown knows all about that. So.
Yeah. I mean, we're willing to work. I mean, like, we're not.
We're both locals and we love this house and we want to do everything we can to make it, but with appropriateness, then we're not looking to do anything.
There's no plan for any dormers, so I think we're halfway there.
Right. Well, it's a great house, and you have a huge lot in the huge yard. I'm so jealous.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We folks who live downtown don't have much of a backyard. Okay, does anyone feel ready to make a motion? Don't be bashful.
I'll make a motion to approve the.
Okay, so Patricia's making a motion that the applicant be allowed to proceed with a demolition permit to remove that whatever man cave. I still love that. Is there a second?
This is Ron, seconded.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Mr. Fay, your vote.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Ron.
Yes.
Okay, and myself I also an aye vote. So, so Ali and Kevin, you can proceed. You will be allowed to get a demolition permit um, to take that thing down. That thing, it's a very good name for it. And wish you luck. And we may see you again, may not. It will all depend. But good luck with your house, and have a good evening.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for your time.
Okay. Whew. Wow, Andy, you're right on top of things. Jail roof dormer. And I think I saw Mr. Griffin. Yes. Okay, Chuck, your talking is permitted and you're live, so to speak. What I'd like to do, if you don't mind, for the sake of time, just very briefly summarize what I think you want to do, and then you can, you'll be free to, turn the floor over to you to correct anything I might have gotten wrong. And or whatever. I just want to try to expedite things as much as possible, because you did a great job of submitting what you want to do and the reasons why you want to do it. So that has saved us a lot of time trying to understand this whole thing. The way I would summarize it is, you've got a situation where there's a sort of a thank you, Andy, that in this particular drawing, we're looking down at the roof of the jail, as labeled plan of the jail roof. The sort of brownish copper colored section is a little section over the sort of the front, not sure what you'd call it, entablature or something, that is currently slate, but Mr. Griffin has described in his documents what happens when snow and avalanches comes down on it. And I totally understand that, because I also have slate roofs, and I completely understand about these snow avalanches and where it's coming in at an angle there, because of the way that peak of that little V is perpendicular to the main slope of the other part of the roof. It tends to dislodge slates, and then you get leaks and so on and so forth. Now, the gist of the problem is that in his preservation restriction, which although it's formally not approved, we still want to abide by that so we don't run into any problems either now or down the road. Copper was not mentioned as a possible roofing material. So I looked into this, Chuck, and I came up with what I think is, well, there's two possible ways we can go. One way to go is to actually try to modify or put in an edit to the preservation restriction to list sheet copper as a alternate roofing material. Another possibility, which I've discussed with Andy Port, and he agrees this is also a possibility, is if you look at page 4 of your preservation restriction, where it talks about the purpose of the whole thing, it talks about what the purpose of it is: to preserve the buildings, the landscape, and so forth and so on. And it says it will be retained and maintained during the term substantially in their current condition, paren, except for the permitted listed exceptions, close paren, or in a restored condition approved by the commission for preservation purposes. And then it goes on to prevent any use, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, tonight, I think the most expeditious thing we could do is to, let you review with us what it is you want to do, and have the commission take a vote on approving your plan, just as we would do if you wanted to do any other work that needed to be reviewed and approved by the commission under the preservation restriction. And that way you wouldn't even have to wait for an edit to the PR or anything. You'd be able to get the okay to proceed. So that's my quick summary. So why don't I turn it, let you talk, Chuck, and see if you would like to add, clarify, or say anything else you'd like.
Well, Glenn, I think you've summarized it well, and in the sake of time, I won't yammer on unless I hear a question. And I'm very happy to have it be the latter approach you take tonight. Let's do whatever's simple. And I'm not needing to change, I don't think, the PR so that copper could be used at any time.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think that would be the case. It doesn't seem like it would likely come up again. I did have one question. If you could you explain it? It said flat seamed copper. I'm familiar somewhat with copper roofs. I had a friend, you might know him, Walter Clay. He sold a house recently. He's on High Street. He roofed his entire roof in copper. Don't know if you're familiar with that one or not. It's the Johnson something house right there on High Street. Wonderful house. Anyway, could you explain to us what a flat seamed copper roof actually is and why that would be better able to resist these snow avalanches?
Sure. Most of us think of copper roofs or any metal roofs being standing seam, where one edge is turned over and the adjacent panel comes over and comes down on top of the raw edge.
Right, sort of crimped together.
But that would not be wise here because, again, I've got snow coming across this with force. So you take the standing seam and you bend it over and make it flat. So it really is you fold over a standing seam, which even makes it more watertight.
Oh, okay. So instead of seeing those small vertical ridges, those are sort of hammered down flat. Are they soldered as well or just sort of crimped?
No, they won't be soldered. They'll just be laid flat. They don't need to be soldered because of the folds that are involved.
Right. Okay. Okay. So let me turn it over to the commission, see if anyone has a question for Mr. Griffin or a comment.
My comment is just I would support Mr. Griffin's plan to use copper on the roof dormer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else have a comment?
Me too.
I didn't catch who that was.
Ron.
Okay, Ron. Thank you, Ron. I'm glad some of you guys are willing to speak up at these meetings. Well, why don't I go ahead and make a motion then? Did I edit? Did I do one? I guess I didn't. Why don't I make a motion that the commission has heard the description of what Mr. Griffin plans to do, and that we approve the use of flat seam copper as described in his presentation and plans for that limited section of the jail roof. What do you call that section? Was I correct in calling it? It's not an entablature. What do you call that portico?
Well, it's the pediment.
Pediment, there you go.
The pediment that's on the front, and I'm just assuming we call this the dormer that is attached to the pediment. I'm not sure the word dormer applies, but
no, yeah, I see Chris shaking his head. We don't want to talk about dormers, but yeah, there you go. So it's this. You see the that triangular sort of Greek-inspired motif there. I mean, I believe you told us that was a thing they did later, that motif. Is that correct, Mr. Griffin?
oh no. That was he did
Original?
2 drawings. The architect, we have one plan that doesn't show it, and then one plan where he physically comes in and draws that line to make it Greek Revival, which was just beginning to sweep the country in 1825.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the little piece we're talking about. And I failed to mention, but you did mention it in your materials, Chuck, that as you can see from this photo, most observers would not even see that particular roof anyway, because it's the roof and the angles and so forth are such that you have to be either high up or further away to see it. Is that a recent photo? I noticed bars are out of windows and that sort of thing. Is there work going on there, Chuck?
Oh yes, I'm at least halfway through to completion of this project, and we'll have a party here when it's done. We'll be able to invite you all.
Yeah, I hope the social distancing will be such that we can do that in an enjoyable way. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and make another motion. The motion is that the Newburyport Historical Commission has reviewed and will approve Mr. Griffin to go ahead with his plan to use this flat seam copper roof on the specific portion as described in this presentation. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That was Christopher Fay, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and 1 second, I'm just making a note here. Okay, so Mr. Fay, your vote?
Is yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Patricia Picnic?
Yes.
Okay, Ron?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is yes. Well, that's good news for you, Mr. Griffin. It means that you can, and I'll put something in writing that can be put in the record, so that for all to see that that this alteration, if you want to call it that, was reviewed and approved by the commission, and because we deem that it will not have an adverse impact on the historical characteristics, or features of the structure. And in fact, and I commented to this to the planning board, that I think it's in the best interest of the preservation of the structure, for the sake of water tightness and all that, that you be allowed to go ahead and do this.
I thank the commissioners. I'm sorry to have to bring this in front of you.
Oh, that not a big deal. This is one of the easier ones of the night. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Griffin. Appreciate your hanging through this fairly lengthy meeting. You're welcome to stick around for the rest, or take off as you please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Okay, a couple more items. Some of you were around, those of you who've been around for a long time by that meeting, like Malcolm and Ron or myself, remember 223 High Street. It's now also known as 6 Hamilton Way. This is that little mini development. Patricia, I know you're familiar with this. It was a beautiful old Gothic house set up on the hill off High Street. Had a great big lot that they've made like almost a little mini subdivision in there. That was a previous owner that did this. Anyway, long story short, at some point, an abutter notified the city that they were starting to build a deck on the back of that old Gothic house, which was under a preservation restriction. This is one of those ones, one of many that's come up, where they agreed to a preservation restriction on the old house in return for being allowed to kind of subdivide and do all this. Okay, so thank you, Andy. Here you see the view from High Street looking up Hamilton Way. That old, right, Andy is circling the old Gothic house up there. The brown half house on the left is not part of the subdivision, and he zoomed in on it. It's a lovely old house, really interesting one. And I have a photo that I took a few years back that shows it before any of this other stuff was here, and it was a really lovely setting that unfortunately is gone, but it is what it is. At any rate, the house itself is under a preservation restriction. So there was a lot of crap that went on, but the bottom line is there was a letter sent to them last August or September about, hey, this has been going on. You need to either remove the posts and things of the beginnings of the deck, or submit a plan for a deck that the Historical Commission can review, just like we reviewed Mr. Griffin's plans to make a change that wasn't his PR. We would review it and either approve it or not. And the owner, I spoke to them at the time. His name was, I actually have my letter here. Hang on a second. Let me see if I have it here. Here it is. His name is Joseph Gialanella. And I believe he's living at 6 Hamilton Way now. So I have a draft of a letter that it hasn't been, you guys haven't seen it yet, but I just sent it to the planning board folks today to take a look at. It basically says, my original letter was from 17 to September 2019. So it's come almost a year ago. He said, I spoke to him on the phone shortly after that letter, and he said he would either submit plans for a deck to be reviewed or take the pieces down. And neither of those things have happened. So the letter gives him 30 days to get back to us on what he's going to do to avoid us referring this for legal action, because it's like getting ridiculous. I understand coronavirus and all that, so I kind of we discussed perhaps going immediately to the city's law office. I decided to give him one chance to respond before we go there. So we'll see what happens. But I'm before you tonight to review this, answer any questions you may have on it, and ask for your okay to go ahead and send this letter that, again, it says, it gives him 30 days from when he gets the letter to either submit plans for a deck to be reviewed, remove the stuff that's there, or at least get back to us and tell us what he's going to do. And so I want your okay to go ahead and send that letter. Does anyone have any questions on that? I know some of you guys weren't here, like, Peter and Joe and Chris, do you remember this one? Were you on the board? Yep, you do. Okay. And I'm sure Ron was. Patricia, were you on the board back then when that came up?
No, I wasn't, but I followed it closely because I remember that the grantor of the PR, meaning the developer, was Foreign LLC incorporated in Delaware with a Hampton, New Hampshire address that's in some place that looks like a house. So I thought the whole thing really mysterious from the beginning, and it's like it haunts me. That whole development haunts me. I think the rear deck is like the least of our problems.
I know.
Because the enforcement isn't going to be remove those houses. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's the enforcement going to be on the PR?
Well, the mitigation is if depends on what he wants to do. If he decides he doesn't need a deck, then he'll remove the posts and things. He does need to build some sort of egress. There's a door back there that he has to have some kind of a stair or egress of some kind that conforms with the code. So he will, need to do something. So I don't know if he wants to, try to do a deck, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. The deck on the rear is kind of the least of our problems, but it was reported, a complaint was made by an abutter. So, and I do, and we, in the bigger scheme of things, I think Andy would probably agree, we do need to set or maintain, depending on as the case may be, the precedent that when there's a preservation restriction, if there's a violation, there's consequences, and we, need developers and homeowners to understand that, there's a legal reality to this whole situation, and it's not a joke. So,
yeah, thank you. I agree, and I agree also. Patricia had hinted at it a little bit. I've seen this project from beginning to end, almost from the very beginning to the end. I think it's a mess from the beginning, frankly, the way this project was permitted. And some of that history was before my time here, just before I got here, but it kind of proved to be a bigger mess. So I agree. I think that it's been well enough time, I think, for the property owner to be responsive, at least to let the commission know how the issue is going to be resolved. I also think that Caitlin and I should just circle back with Jennifer Blanchet, the zoning administrator, and Bob Armstrong, the building commissioner, because if I'm not mistaken, I think this work was done without a building permit too.
I think so, yeah.
Well, we can circle back on that, but in either case, I think that it should be communicated clearly that the city officials, building commissioner, zoning administrator, commission, find that this has been an unacceptable amount of time without a response, and then if the chair could so authorize you and agree that we should just follow up with legal counsel as needed to get their attention and get a response.
Have you had Andy? Have you had a chance to look at the draft letter?
I did. Yeah, thank you. I didn't have any issues with that. I think it makes sense there. I think the question at this point is they've obviously been given notice before. It's not exactly clear why a person would not be responsive to now. I know COVID's been an issue recently, but that was not an issue last year. So we've had a couple of instances like this that happen over time where people are unresponsive. And again, I mean, I certainly wouldn't expect anybody to get any other building permits or things like that. And I just want to make sure that the building commissioner is sending the same signal to these folks, because clearly work done without a building permit is also a violation of the building code. So
yeah, and just so you understand too, Andy, the reason I was kind of cutting him a little bit of slack was twofold. He was not he, meaning Mr. Gialanella, was not the one who did the illegal work himself. He kind of inherited this situation. So because of that, and he did say he would, if he was decided to do a permit, he should be able to do let us know something by spring. And of course, spring is when the whole coronavirus thing hit. Anyway, so I'm giving him this one last chance to respond. And again, it's just 30 days, so it's cutting it. I think that's,
I think that makes sense. It's reasonable.
yeah, it's generous, but also it's firm, you know, like, hey, 30 days, come on, you know, either you know what, or get off the pot, as they say, and then we can work out something to go from there. So the motion, I'll put a motion on the floor that the chair be authorized to send this letter asking the owner of the property to respond within 30 days with their plans as to what they're going to do, and then follow that up with appropriate action. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. That sounded like Mr. Fay. Okay, 223. I'm just making a note here, just 1 second. Okay, so that's the motion. Mr. Fay, what's your vote?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, Mr. McNamee, what's your vote?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Picnic. Patricia.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Ron.
Just one question, Glenn. You do have the reference to legal action. If he doesn't do anything in the 30-day period, there will be legal action.
Yeah, I can quote you from the letter because I still have the draft up on my screen. It says, the original, I'll read you the last paragraph, which is in bold. The original deadline for action on this violation was November 14, 2019. So resolution of this matter is long overdue. To avoid referral of this matter for legal action, you must respond to this letter within 30 days of receipt to the Office of Planning and Development in City Hall.
Good. That's great. I vote yes.
Okay, yeah, so it kind of, you know, short, sweet, to the point, 1 page. Okay, sounds like you guys approve, so I'll, and then if you were okay with that as it was, I'll send the file, well, actually you already have it as an attachment. I haven't made any changes to it, so you have that. So we can have Diane or Caitlin or someone, you know, send it, you know, certified, however you do official business like that. Okay.
Sounds good. Yep.
Yep. Okay, running down to the end here. I don't, for some reason it's not on the, oh, there it is, approval of minutes, number C. Patricia, D is your talk on the National Alliance for Preservation Commission. You want to carry that forward to some time when it's not quite so late?
Let's carry forward. I just want to say one thing. So I went to this virtual conference from National Alliance for Preservation Commission. So it's people like us from all over the country. And so in a couple weeks or a couple months when we have time, I want to tell you about the highlights, because there were 2 sessions just on the Secretary standards, a session on design review, a session on enforcement, things like that. But I do want to say one thing. I got into a big discussion about dormers with a woman from a community in Colorado that they don't have dormers. So food for thought before our next meetings. She said, when applicants are applying to make changes to a roof line based on the argument that they need more living space in what was an attic, then because attic space is not considered living space for the purposes of calculating square footage for the city's property appraisals, arguments about needed living space are not entertained as an argument against abiding by the standards for preserving the roof line. Really interesting, because I think a lot of times when people want to expand, they're going into the attic, which isn't really legally, technically part of the square footage of the house. So think about that one. Okay, and then someday I'll tell you the rest, because I got a lot of good stuff out of the conference, but thank you.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to take a look at their assessor's sheet to see if it shows first floor. Okay, it does. In the case of 2 Neptune Street, it does show the finished upper story as having living area, and
space. She wants to use the crawl space. What was the crawl space? Like to put the washer and dryer in the
well, it's interesting. Hang on a second. First floor.
My third floor isn't finished. My third floor finished attic isn't part of my square footage, I don't think.
Yeah, the part that she showed as crawl space, that is not included in living area.
Right.
And just the front part where there's more ceiling height is. So it's only like 440 square feet, and another 440 feet that's not counted.
Right.
So it's about half. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. That makes perfect sense, but it never occurred to me. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that. In fact, I'm going to have to rebuke you for not cluing me into that conference. If it was a Zoom conference, I might have been able to attend it.
Oh, I didn't know it was all week. It was a whole
Oh,
week.
it's a whole week. Okay, well, I might not have been able to do that.
Oh my God, yeah. Okay. It was supposed to be in Washington State. It would have been more fun to be there, but
Yeah.
it was fun to look at it on the screen. Anyway, more of that later.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. So did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes from July 23rd? I know, Patricia, you saw my email and you did respond, and so Gretchen has that. So, we'll have that minor touch up there. Is there a motion to approve those minutes, perhaps?
I'll make a motion. Oh, Chris is making a motion, yes.
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Chris, is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have 2 seconds. Okay, I think Joe and somebody else. Okay, going around. Christopher, I assume since it was your motion, you're a yes?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Joe?
Yes.
Morgan, yes. Ms. Picnic?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I'll vote a yes. Is there any last thing anyone wants to say before a motion to adjourn is taken?
Thank you for having cameras on. So nice to see all of you.
Yeah, it was kind of nice. And it ensured that no one could fall asleep because we'd catch you.
I couldn't start drinking beer until this is over, so yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you don't know what's in here. Actually, it's just seltzer, but I dare not do anything. Well, I'm supposed to be chairing these meetings. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, 1 second.
And I'll second it. This is Joe.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Picnic.
Yes.
Mr. Ziemba.
Yes.
And the chair is yes. Unanimous. Okay, well, that ends the August 13th, 2020 meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission. Thank you, Andy, for doing your usual exemplary job of managing the visuals and audio and all that, muting and unmuting and so on.
Welcome.
And see you all again soon.
And thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Okay, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.